Welcome to Kit's Myths and Mysteries, listened to in all 50 states and 39 countries. I'm your host, Kit Crum. Join me as I explore stories of the strange and unexplained that have taken place in a world you thought you knew. Today, Roswell's Fringe Theory. That is to say, there is evidence that perhaps the flying saucer that crashed in 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico, was man-made. I'll begin with three assumptions that most theories can agree on. First, that a flying saucer did crash near Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947. Second, that bodies were recovered from the crash site. And third, that there are scientists working on projects that are rated above top secret and that U.S. military branches and the federal government are not privy to. The thread that connects the pieces of this theory is that the security team surrounding these super top secret scientific projects has access to the best technology in the field of stealth, investigation, and manipulation, and are possessed of the ability to control all branches of the military as well as the federal government with the purpose of keeping these projects secret. The purpose of this fringe theory is to establish not just that a flying saucer crashed near Roswell and bodies were retrieved, but the source of the flying saucer, the nature of the crew, and the evidence that the security teams protecting various super top secret projects were involved. To understand the crash of the flying saucer near Roswell in 1947, we need to go back 4 years to 1943 and parallel projects intended to bring World War II to an end. The project brought to fruition was dubbed Little Boy. It was the first atomic bomb, the one that was dropped in Hiroshima. The first controlled nuclear reaction was in 1942 at the University of Chicago's reactor. Enrico Fermi oversaw the first controlled energy release from the nucleus of an atom. After intense effort, the Oak Ridge plant in Tennessee began to produce a bomb-grade U-235 from 1942 to 1945. The Manhattan Project continued progress toward the end result, an atomic bomb. The parallel project was dubbed Project Rainbow. On August 12, 1943, it was leaked that the U.S. Navy conducted a test of some sort on the USS Eldridge DE, or Destroyer Escort, at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. The exact nature of this test is open to speculation. The tests, or tests, were conducted, but only to produce undesirable results, unfortunately. Afterwards, the project was supposedly canceled, not as the public was led to believe because it failed, but because the Manhattan Project was moving ahead without a hitch. But Project Rainbow was not only not canceled, it was not an attempt to make the USS Eldridge invisible, nor was this project conducted by the Navy. It was simply that the Navy vessel was chosen as a guinea pig. The name Rainbow was attached to the project because of the nature of the rainbow to start at one point and end at another. It was determined that if Navy vessels could be transported from an Allied area to a battle zone in a matter of minutes, then it could turn the tide of the war. Project Rainbow was based on Einstein's theory on the space-time continuum. Two massive Tesla coils, which acted as electromagnetic generators, were utilized. One was mounted forward and one was mounted aft. Other accounts state that a series of magnetic generators called degaussers were used. When activated, the electromagnetic field would extend out from the ship. When the actual test was put into motion, a number of unexpected and bizarre side effects occurred. As the electromagnetic field increased in strength, it began to extend as far out as 100 yards from the ship in all directions, forming a large sphere. Within this field, the ship became fuzzy and indistinct, and a greenish haze formed around the vessel, obscuring it from view. Eventually, the only visible object was the outline of the hull of the Eldridge, where it entered the water. Then, to the amazement of onlookers, the entire ship vanished from view. It was at this point, the vanishing of the Eldridge, that the true power of electromagnetic field that had been created was revealed. The Eldridge had not only vanished from view, observers in Philadelphia. It had vanished from Philadelphia altogether. The ship had been instantly transported several hundred miles from Philadelphia, Norfolk, Virginia, and this was the goal. After a few minutes, the ship once again vanished from Norfolk, Virginia, to return to Philadelphia. The failings of the test have become purposefully obscured and vague, as was the intention of the team that was in charge of keeping Project Rainbow top secret secure. Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. 22 days later, Japan surrendered and World War II was brought to an end. But the research on Project Rainbow continued on. I'll digress for a moment. While the Russians were storming Berlin in search of Hitler, the Americans were sweeping up German scientists under Project Paperclip. This is pretty much public knowledge, and bringing them to the United States. Two of these scientists were the Horton brothers, designers of a flying disc. Their design is a prototype for today's stealth fighter, by the way. But this was 1945. It was believed that the shape of the disc was likely to withstand travel through time, through space-time, as they understood it then, better than a battleship. Einstein believed time is a dimension that it can be traveled just like other spatial dimensions. You can only go to the future, though, through this time, at least according to Einstein. Remember, this was 1947. With the aid of the Horton brothers, a disk was created that would accommodate a crew of 3. It was believed that once consumed by a powerful electromagnetic field like the Eldridge, the disk would be transported several hundred miles and then returned. The test took place in the Groom Dry Lake bed, later to become Area 51. But somehow in transport, the disk was lost until it crashed 800 miles away in Roswell, New Mexico. Local military authorities immediately identified the disk as a flying saucer, and 3 crewmen were removed from the site. When the security for Project Rainbow in less than 24 hours became known or learned of the crash, they set out one of their own with fake evidence that would validate their story of the crash being a sophisticated radar balloon and not a flying saucer. Dates and events contained in this podcast have come to the author from several sources involved in top secret security and 2 scientists connected with the Horton brothers and Project Rainbow. To the best of my knowledge, Project Rainbow is still engaged in research and may be the cause for so many flying saucer sightings. This is Kit Crumb. I hope you've been following the videos on my channel, Kit Myths and Mysteries, Roswell's Fringe Theory. If you have any comments, be sure to leave them for me and I'll respond immediately. This is Kit Crumb. Thanks for listening.